Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today, Ann Kaplan. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Hi, well, thanks for having me.
And tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm a parent coach and I'm also a mom, so I've got 4 of my own kids. And I work with all different kinds of families, all people with all different kinds of ages of kids and challenges and things like that, to just parent the way that they want to and improve their relationship with their kids, the behavior in their homes. Sometimes parents hire me because they want to improve their behavior, which is that's pretty much where it starts for all of us, whether that's why you hired me or not, right? We can change ourselves. So
Yes, I think that I've heard people say, there's no bad kids or bad dogs. It's just the adults that they deal with.
yeah,
And I think that boils down to that it has to do with us, and we don't like that responsibility sometimes.
yeah, sure. And I think also that idea or like the specter of being a bad mom is huge for parents. And so I would also say there's no bad moms. It's just really about, in fact, I did a consultation with a couple yesterday where we really talked about the punitive kind of paradigm that they had brought to their parenting because of the way that they were raised. And it was really showing up in the way they were parenting their daughter, talking about like, be good, don't be bad, be a good girl, all of those things. And one of the biggest kind of revolutions, I think, for parents and who work with me, and I think just even in our generation in general, is moving away from this idea of categorizing us as good or bad and
Mhm.
looking at discipline through this like punitive lens and turning it much more into a relationship based, like what's going on here and how can we be the best we can in this moment instead of this is good, this is bad, whether we're talking about behavior of our kids or behavior of ourselves.
Yeah. Because ultimately when you think about it, if it's good or bad, it's right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And there's what, 1.5 million different ways to be a parent, and every child is different, every parent is different, every person is different. And if there's right and wrong, then who decides what's right and who decides what's wrong? And ultimately it is what you said. It kind of boils down to how we were parented. And and if we do something that our parents did that we liked, that makes us right. And if we do something that our parents did that we didn't like, then that makes us wrong. Yeah.
I think one of the big game changers for me, and I've watched a couple of my clients have this similar aha as they've gone through the work, is realizing like, oh, if I'm using my parents as this barometer or jumping off point for my parenting, even if it's because I'm using it to tell myself I'm going to do something different than my parents did. I'm going to do this because my parents didn't do it, or I'm not going to do this because my parents did do it. Even in that situation, like our parents are still defining us as parents instead of actually allowing ourselves to parent solely in response to who we are, what our North Star is, what our belief system is, and our metrics and values, regardless of what we experienced as kids.
Yeah.
And I think that's, you know, I think it's a little bit of a revelation to make that decision. And then it's work to actually do that, because now you actually have to do the work to leave the past behind and connect with what's going on internally for you and use that as your kind of battery pack that fuels your parenting.
Yeah, I like that. And, you know, in my own parenting, I used my parents as a kind of as a jumping off place because it's the example that I had, and I, you know, took bits and pieces of what I liked and what I didn't like, and then I started, um, you know, if a lot of times, and my dad did this too, that, you know, he didn't like how his dad treated him, and so he did the complete opposite. And my grandpa was a yeller, I guess, and my dad my grandpa was very authoritarian, and you're going to do it my way or the highway, right? And which was very typical of that generation. And then my dad was like, oh well, I'm just never going to give advice ever. And so all of his kids really felt, you know, somewhat disconnected from him. And
Sure.
so, you know, my luckily I've got I feel like it's luckily that I got into coaching when I did, and you know, the basis of the podcast is better parenting through self-healing. And so I think that it's kind of what you're talking about, where it's like really letting your soul and your, you know, be the guide. But can you explain what that looks like in what you've been talking about?
Yeah, sure. I think you touched on some really big commonalities between our approaches, I would say. You know, that is something that I walk my clients through in the beginning, these different four different styles of parenting, the authoritative, which is kind of like what we would really like, versus authoritarian or permissive, or it sounds like in your case with your dad, he was more of the disconnected parenting style.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and really understanding that there's two levers that we pull to become that authoritative parent that we know is what science tells us, what experience tells us is what kids need. And those two levers are the lever of emotional connection and attunement with our kids, and the lever of control and boundaries and consequences and enforcing those boundaries and things like that. So kids need both, right? They
Mm-hmm.
need the structure and the rules and predictability and consistency, but they also need empathy and attunement and connection and emotional safety with their parent. And so when we pull those two levers and we actually can manage to do both of those things, we are showing up in these fabulous ways for our kids. Their behavior improves, our relationship with them improves, like our happiness and satisfaction and our relationship improves. But it's not as simple as just pulling a lever, right? Like there's a reason why we're showing up the way that we are. And that gets to that whole self-healing piece that you mentioned. Like we all have obstacles that make it hard for us to show up with integrity around our boundaries. And it's also sometimes hard for us, like you said, you gave a great example with your dad. Like he had this probably traumatic experience of being controlled and dominated by his parent, and that made it really, really hard for him to step up and get involved with his kids because it felt like maybe he was doing something wrong or even evil, depending on his experience of childhood. So, you know, if he was really working towards, if someone in that situation is really working towards being that authoritative parent, they first need to do the work to heal what experiences they had when they were kids so that it doesn't feel scary to set boundaries with somebody, or it doesn't feel wrong or domineering to get involved and connected to someone emotionally. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's easy for people like us to sit here in the cheap seats and say, oh, you need to be really, you know, connected with your kid and also have boundaries with your kid. There you go. That's the magical formula for
Right.
great parents, you know, but
Wave the magic
and
wand.
even parenting experts in the room. I mean, I just meeting you, but I will also I feel pretty confident in guessing that you and I both have our own challenges in showing up authoritatively with our children. You know, if I'm not careful, I switch much more into the authoritarian place where I'm lose my temper and try to control people and, you know, put them in their place. And, you know, and then also there's been times in my life where I've really been that permissive parent because of my own fears and hangups and concerns about what's going on with my kids. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's easy to say, hard to do, or another way I think about it a lot is the answer is simple, but it's not easy.
It is very simple to say there's a harmony between these four types of parenting that everybody needs, and then the practicality of implementing these styles is not as simple. Because we're human and we're a hot mess who were raised by hot messes, and
Yeah, exactly.
we're gonna raise hot messes. Like it's
I really think that's a important piece of this puzzle. And I think it's a real tough pill for us to swallow as parents is like, yes, we can say like, oh, well, I can see my challenges. A lot of them came from my experiences when I was younger. And, you know, I could also see how maybe if things had been different, if my parents had behaved differently, or if I had been in different circumstances, I wouldn't have these particular challenges. It's really easy to take those observations and make them mean something completely false, which is if I show up the right way for my kid and I don't put my child in these challenging circumstances, then they won't have these challenges when they grow up. And that is completely false. Your kid will absolutely struggle in life. And I always say to my clients, at some point during the time when we work together, something will come up where we have to have this kind of conversation that is basically like, guess what? There is no way to get around the fact that having you as a parent is one thing that your child is going to have to get over in their lives. Like my kids are going to have to get over having me as a mom and having my husband as a dad. Like that's just the way the system works, you know, and it's not because of a shortcoming on our part that our kids have to get over us. It's
Yeah.
because they're a different person than we are that they have to get over us.
And my boyfriend and I talk about this a lot, that, the a lot of times the way that people are parented leads to great success in that person's life. The pain of how they were parented leads to that great success. And then they have kids and they say, well, I was in a lot of pain and probably I still am in a lot of pain. So I'm going to parent my child differently, and my child's not going to feel that pain. And then they don't do it in a way that actually fosters growth with the child. And so they just give them money and freedom and just do whatever you want. And then the kid has,
Yeah.
they never had to deal with challenges growing up. And so then when they're 18, they're slapped in the face by the reality of life. And so there has to be,
Right.
this harmonious balance that who knows how to get the balance of perfection. There isn't one,
I
but
think
we think
also
we can find it.
it's really helpful for us to cultivate that comfort with our kids' discomfort. Because if we feel that, you know, when our kids are struggling or suffering, that we have to fix that, we really rob them of all of those growth opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes very hard to hold boundaries with kids because we know that by holding a boundary, we're going to be creating discomfort for them. And when they struggle socially or emotionally, it's really hard for us to truly be supportive instead of solving their problems because we know that they're experiencing even more than probably discomfort, but actual pain.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to all of these kind of like hovercrafting and arguing and trying to control our kid. Like all of it comes from the fact that we have a hard time accepting that kids being unhappy, it's not a problem. It's just part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And what they really need is support when they're going through that hard thing, not for us to take that hard thing away.
Mm.
But, you know,
Beautifully said.
yeah.
But it's hard because we love them and we don't want them to suffer. We know what suffering feels like. And so we don't want them to suffer. And so then we try to make it, some of us will try to make it, their existence suffer free. And you can't do that 24/7.
No. Were possible to do that, that would be super harmful for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Really hard to remember things like boundaries and discomfort and, holding a line and not solving things for kids. It's actually for them. It's not for us. We're not being selfish. We're not, you know, being callous or uncaring to our children. We're actually doing something that serves them
Yeah.
very, very well.
And I think that a really good example is that I have a really strong desire that every time my son has trouble waking up,
Mhm.
I want to give him the opportunity to not go to school. Like I want to say, oh, it's okay, you can stay home. And when, and I caught myself this morning, I was like, well, he does not fit into this early morning lifestyle. Like he's very much more of a night owl than I am. Like I'm awake at 5 by choice. And I'm like, I have all this energy in the morning, and both him and my boyfriend are very like, I have energy at nighttime. But most of the time we start work at 8 or 9 in the morning. And so we got to how to kind of get into a routine of and learning how to push through this, like, okay, I'm tired, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to school. And, it's,
Mhm.
but I'm like, I want to protect,
Right. Well, and that's a great
solve
example.
it.
I mean, I think that's a great example because it
Yeah.
illustrates perfectly how not holding the boundary for him that we get up and we go to school, and this is the time that that happens, only serves to postpone the moment in time when he has to actually learn how to fit himself into the society he lives in.
Mhm.
This not being nocturnal, unless you have a very specific job and lifestyle, that just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's only postponing this like heartache of him learning that lesson by saying, okay, well, you know, I guess that rule doesn't apply to you because
Mhm.
you're my kid and I don't want to watch my kid be tired and crabby and have to go through something hard. Like,
And where I struggle too is like I have the thought of, well, what if he's an entrepreneur and sets his own hours and da da da, right? Because I'm an entrepreneur and I set my own hours, and my own hours happen to be 5 in the morning. And but
but also like you got to decide that because you had the experience of what the other, you know, way of being
exactly.
like, and you got, and that helped you learn about yourself.
Yeah.
You helped you learn, here's something I know about myself. I actually don't like working for a boss. Or here's something I know about myself. I'm an early bird and I don't care to work regular business hours. Here's something about myself. I actually believe that I can create what I want in my life and my career. Like, how would you have ever learned all those things about yourself if you weren't experiencing the world and with all its ups and downs and black and white and good and bad and all that good stuff?
Yeah. And when I was growing up, I was the kid that I got away with a lot of stuff because I whined about it enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so uh when my mom would ask me to do something and I would whine enough and she would give up and do it. And the lesson that I learned from that is that if I whine long enough, someone else will come along and do the hard thing for me. And
Mm-hmm.
I just want you to try for 12 years to build a business that way and see how that goes.
And it's probably something that you come up against like regularly. Like we all have our own like grab bag of things that feel uncomfortable or challenging to us. And that grab bag doesn't change. We just get better at dealing with everything that's in there. But, you know, like I've got my own hangups in building my business for sure. It's not that one, but I've got my own stuff, right? And like it never changes, right? Like I just get better at identifying it, knowing what to do about it, knowing how to work with it, you know, all of those things so that it doesn't own me anymore. But yeah, for sure. Like it's not that there was going to be a way for your parents to raise you where you wouldn't have any grab bag of challenges and running your business, but it would be really cool if part of your work wasn't like overcoming this like really unhealthy experience you had chronically for your entire childhood.
Mm-hmm. And if you, I think where this all breaks down is that we don't value the lessons that we experienced through our parents. And so we want to change our child's experience so they don't have to deal with those lessons. But
yeah,
but I've heard this somewhere where if we all throw our problems into a pile, we would grab our own problems back out. Like
right. The devil you know is better than the devil you don't.
right.
Well, and I
So,
think also it's a grappling with like, okay, if all of our experiences, like I have this kind of talk that I like to give to my clients sometimes where it's like we all wish that our kids didn't have to learn stuff the hard way, but the truth is that the hard way is the only way.
mm,
The way people learn is through experiencing the outcome of their choices. And
mhm,
so you can't get your kid to this amazing finish line without also accepting that in order for them to get there, they have to do all these things the hard way. They have to struggle, they have to make mistakes, they have to suffer the consequences of those mistakes. Like that has to be it. So it's like, okay, the hard way is the only way. But then at the same time, we can see some of the things we experienced as childhood is stuff that we just feel maybe even morally opposed to. Like, I will not hit my children. I will not scream at them. You know, I will not, you know, shut them down or refuse to listen to their emotions and things like that, because to me that feels like actually like morally bankrupt way to parent. So okay, my kids have to still learn things the hard way, and I get that I learned some of the things that I have learned, yes, the hard way, but also I would say the wrong way in terms of like morally wrong. So
mhm,
how can I now be still allowing the hard way to be the only way for my child, but showing up with some integrity as a parent at the same time? And it is a balancing act. I mean, this is why people like us exist, because it's almost impossible to do these things without getting new information and having someone hold us accountable and having someone help us face and confront the unfinished business that we have in order to be able to do it, whether it's a coach, whether it's a therapist, whether it's both. Like there, I have yet to see a parent show up in that authoritative way that we keep talking about without having done some homework.
mm,
It's
yeah,
not the default. Authoritative parenting is nobody's default.
yeah. Yeah, and I had heard a speaker say one time, to not let the pain, something devastating happen, to be the thing that makes you change. But I think that pain is an ingredient
Yeah.
inside inside the change. Like humans don't just decide to do something different unless there's pain.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the degree of pain doesn't have to be like I wait till my spouse passes away in order to figure out how to support myself. Like that's it, you don't want to wait necessarily until that degree of pain, but if you, so this is her story that I'm telling, but if you realize, you know, that I'm feeling unfulfilled in this role of housewife and stay-at-home mom, then I'm gonna I'm gonna make a change to figure out how to be more fulfilled,
Mm-hmm.
because that was a pain.
Mm-hmm.
that's nudging you in this direction.
But I
And
think what we're talking about is a difference between reactivity versus responsiveness.
mm-hmm,
This person that you heard this talk about, like, don't let pain be the thing that pushes you forward. Well, if you're just if you're in a reactive state because of this pain that you're experiencing, and all you're doing is basically being like the equal and opposite direction of that because you're trying to get as far away from that as possible, that
mm-hmm,
bringing intentionality to your life. All you're doing is being controlled and ruled by that pain. The same as if you decide, well, my parents did X, Y, and Z, so I'm definitely not going to do that. All
mm-hmm,
you're doing is, being this almost like a reflexive, knee jerk reaction to this experience that you had versus bringing intentionality and responsiveness to the pain you're experiencing. I don't really like my life as a stay-at-home mom, for example. Well, I'm not just going to go out half-cocked and go get the first job that I see posted on the want ads. What if I decide to bring some intentionality and thought and sit in that pain, actually process that emotion, bring some thoughtfulness to my situation, and give myself the time and space to discover, what do I want to do instead, and what would actually fulfill me, meaning let me come bring it back to who I am, that whole, like, what are my values, my beliefs, my joy, all of that stuff, and then make an informed and responsive decision about how I want to change my life. So in that scenario, sure, the pain was the original catalyst that inspired you to now begin this process of introspection and emotional processing and awareness and intention, and then that leads to whatever the next step is.
mm-hmm.
But stay in that reactive state, all we're doing is ping ponging around from one bad decision to the next. And
Yeah,
that's so how a lot of us parent.
yeah,
There's I'm actually working on a blog post right now that's like, are you a reactive or a responsive parent? Like, if you're
mm,
parenting out of reactivity, your kid does something, it drives you crazy, well, that's it, now you have to go to your room, or that's it, no phone for a week, or that's it, you'll never see your girlfriend again, whatever it is. We are not effective parenting strategies, but we're not taking the time to actually be reflective about what's going on, so that then we can actually choose an effective response, which might be, you're welcome to have your phone back as soon as you have no missing school assignments, or
mm.
whatever the consequences.
I really like that. And I like the way that you broke that down. So I hope that that helps you with your blog article that you're writing.
I'll go back and recording and just
Yeah,
transcribe
there
it.
you go. No, it was perfect because I knew what I was saying, but I wasn't saying it as eloquently as you were saying it. So I appreciate the way that you picked out what I was saying and the concept and explained it. So is
Yeah,
there
this is I feel like this is the work of people who do what we do. It's helping
Mhm.
our clients learn how to shift out of reactivity and into responsiveness. And just to throw another R word in the mix, the key to that getting there is reflection, right? You,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't need to immediately it's not like you're putting your hand on a hot stove and you immediately need to pull your hand away. We have the wherewithal. We came earthside equipped with a nervous system to allow us to actually reflect and process the pain that we feel and do something productive with it, instead of just constantly being, in this flight or fight mode.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Is there a piece of advice that you want to share with moms?
Well, I guess based on our conversation, I would
Right.
say take the time to actually process your emotions, sit in your emotions, reflect on your emotions, and use that as the true impetus for your next step.
That's awesome. And is there a book that's been instrumental in your personal development journey?
Glad you gave me a heads up, because otherwise I would have been just standing here like going through a Rolodex of
All the books.
My suggestion for everybody in terms of reading is a book called A New Earth. It's not new. The book isn't new. It's called A New Earth. It's by Eckhart Tolle. I
Mm,
loved that book so much that I used it as the entire jumping off point and theme for the retreat that I hosted last fall. And all of my retreat guests got the book, and then a little reading guide for me of like, you don't have to read the whole book if you don't want to, but read these little excerpts, because it is totally about exactly what we've been talking about this entire time, getting out of the reactivity and actually bringing presence and connection to our parent, not just to our parenting, but
For
you know,
life.
of parenting. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so awesome. Well, I appreciate this conversation and everything that that you've added to the podcast. Like it's been a beautiful co-creation. And when you are finished with the blog, since this will probably come out in a couple of months, I would imagine your blog will be done before then.
Yeah.
If you remember, send it to me and put it in the link of the put it in the link of the podcast.
I love that. Sure.
And where can our listeners find you?
Yeah, so the best way, you can always find me on my website, which is annkaplanparentcoach.com. But also, if you actually want to start getting a little bit more immersed in the work that I do and the way that I teach my clients how to implement both of those elements, pull both of those levers, a really great way to get started is to get my free workbook, which is called Getting Kids to Listen the First Time. It's easy link. It's a bit.ly link. So it's bit.ly/kids-who-listen. And that workbook I'm really proud of, because it walks parents through some of the fundamental principles that I teach all my clients that apply to every parenting situation, but it specifically applies it to this universal experience we have as parents of finding ourselves repeating ourselves all day long. Kids aren't listening to us, things get escalated. We all find ourselves, no matter how old our kids are, in that dynamic. And so I always find that it's so much easier to learn these principles through examples and real, like, tangible lived experience. And so, I could have made a workbook that's just like, here's the 4 fundamental principles of effective parenting, and taught it in this conceptual way. But this workbook really allows you to understand it in a deeper way and also get real results with your kid, like basically within 24 hours, to be honest. So I really encourage everyone to get that. And then once you get that, you'll also be on my email list. So you'll get the blog posts that I'm writing right now, and all those good things. I always send out emails every week that have really tangible parenting advice in them.
Awesome. I love that. And again, thank you for joining me today. And for that free download, because I can't imagine that there's any moms out there listening that don't want their kids to listen the first time.
Yeah, so I think probably like one of everyone's like deepest wishes, but we think it's like wishing for a unicorn, but it's not. It's real.
No, yeah. Awesome. Well, there will be another episode of Imperfect Momming coming for you all next week. And until then, keep healing. Bye, guys. Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AliciaLyons.com. That's ALYSIALYONS.com. See you next time.